We should, yeah, we should be live now. So, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for an evening with Dani Atkins to discuss Dani's latest book, A Sky Full of Stars. Thank you, Dani, for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's really nice. It's like going out, but not going out.
Thank you. I can't hear you very well, Dani. Then it was really bad feedback on that. So I'll just carry on, and hopefully the sound will sort itself out. So Dani joins us from Hertfordshire, where she lives with her husband, a Siamese cat, and a very soppy border collie. She's an award-winning novelist, and you've probably heard of her 2013 debut, Fractured. And it's so successful, it's been translated into 21 languages, and it's sold more than 500,000 copies since its first publication in the UK. Dani's the author of 4 other best-selling novels, and one of which, This Love, won the Romantic Novel of the Year award in 2018. So, as always, I hope you're all taking advantage of having a book launch from home and wearing your comfiest pyjamas, and you've all got a nice drink. We've got a nice drink, haven't we, Dani?
We have, absolutely.
We're both on gin. Yeah, good call. And Dani was just saying that she could have even been wearing a pajama bottoms and been just glamorous from the waist up, which is quite cool. So yeah, if you've joined us for a Facebook author event before, you'll know that we love for you at home to get involved. So firstly, I'm going to ask Dani a few questions, and then we'd love to take your questions too. So if you leave a question for us in the comments, 1, it could be asked this evening, but 2, you'll also be in with a chance of winning a signed copy of A Sky Full of Stars, and we'll announce the winner this evening. Bear with us, as always, with any technical difficulties. Sam is around to deal with that, and hopefully everything will run smoothly. So I'm going to start, Dani, by just reading the blurb from the back of the book, and then I'll start with some questions. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Lovely. So first, I just want to say that A Sky Full of Stars, which came out, was at the beginning of this month?
Yep, it came out last Thursday.
Yeah. I absolutely love the title. I think it's a lovely title. So I'm just going to read the blurb from the back. He'd have done everything differently if he'd known she'd be gone so soon. When Lisa married Alex, she gave his life meaning. She was a professional astronomer, a stargazer. Alex, Lisa, and their young son Connor made a happy little universe. But when Lisa dies suddenly, their universe is destroyed. Then Alex meets 4 strangers, 2 men and 2 women, who never met Lisa, but whose lives changed profoundly because she died. As Alex hears their stories, he begins to realise the world may not be as cruel and senseless as it seems. Perhaps, after all, the future is written in the stars. So that's definitely intrigued me, and I do want to read more. So I wonder, Dani, if you tell us a bit about your latest book and how you came up with the story and the characters.
Okay. Well, like most of my books, its basis is an emotional drama. So it's centering on families and friendship and love. And like a lot of my books, it does have some element of tragedy in it. This time it's at the very beginning, so that's even from the back blurb, you can see that poor Alex's life is about to change dramatically. And I really wanted to write this particular book from 2 points of view. I've done that before in other books, but I've had 2 female voices. And this was the first time that I wanted to try and have a male voice as well. And to further differentiate them, for the female voice, which is the character of Molly, one of the people that comes into Alex's life through first person, and Alex's chapters were in third person. That was sort of a departure for me, something I'd not done before.
And how did you find that?
It was very good. I was actually concerned that I wouldn't be able to think inside Alex's head, because I'm so used to all my other books have been first person with a female voice. But actually Alex's chapters were really easy to write. I think I heard his voice very strongly in my head, because we start the book with Alex, and although I wouldn't say there is a main protagonist, he felt very well formed by the time I was writing. By the time I got to the end of the first chapter and moved on to Molly, I felt like I knew Alex. So when it came time to return to him and his chapters, it was very easy to. And his story was so touching and so poignant because he was struggling with his grief. He was struggling to be a good dad to their little boy Connor, who was having a very hard time accepting what had happened. And these new people who he meets, he latches onto, and perhaps for the wrong reasons. But it's about friendships and love and an enduring love, of somebody who may no longer be with us, but is still very much felt as a presence. So that they were the things I wanted to hit and explore in the story. And I really enjoyed. I mean, you like every book that you write, but this one I particularly writing and get a feel for it as you're going along. And you think, I think readers will like this one too. So I don't know. We'll wait and see.
Yeah. Normally, I have read the book before, but with this event, I haven't because it got booked quite much closer to the date. So I would definitely be reading it for sure. It sounds wonderful.
I hope you let me know what you think of it.
I will do. So I think I've read your other books, and I'd say the characters do stay with you after you finish reading. So I wondered, and you just said you really felt you got to know Alex. So I wondered if that's how it is for the reader. How long does it take for you to leave a book behind after you've written it, especially when you're maybe trying to write your next book?
It's actually very difficult because I don't write particularly fast. So it takes me about a year to do a book. Okay. So you've got these characters who are living in your head for a very long time. And when you finally finish, when you finally type the end, you actually realize that you're going to miss them. I mean, the best compliment I can ever receive from somebody who's read a book is that the characters felt so real. They felt like they were their own friends, and they could empathize with what they were going through. So I think that's the highest compliment I can be paid as an author. If I can feel that they're real and somehow manage to impart that in the story as well, you do miss them, and you are aware that your next character is they're a little bit 2D to begin with. I need more depth because the person I've left behind was more fully formed. So it is to be a little sort of harsh and shut the door on the old people, otherwise they'll want to come back.
Yeah. Have you ever started a character and then just really not got on board with them and thought, I need to just start again?
No, I'm normally okay with the character. They do change their names sometimes, quite a lot. So then you go back and you think, who's that? And then you realise that you hadn't actually done your search and replace completely. But naming a character for me is very important. And if I can't get that name right, then I really do struggle. I go through baby name books and look at credits on films and TV shows. Normally I can't name them after somebody I know very well, or somebody I know and don't like, perhaps would be really hard. Because you just cannot separate the person. I made a mistake in Fractured of naming all my characters after my daughter's friends, which I thought was actually quite a nice idea, but she didn't, and so she didn't read it for years because of that. So it can backfire horribly. So you need to have a name that, and then afterwards, after the dust had settled and everybody had read the book, then if the character in the book wasn't particularly nice, then people thought that I didn't like them in real life. So they said, my character in the book wasn't as nice as your character in the book. I thought, this is just like a reil minefield. I'm never doing this again.
So you're better just steering clear of anyone that you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, my friend, I won't name her, is expecting a baby, and she works in a nursery. So it depends how well behaved the child is as to how she likes the name, and how she's like, well, I can't name my child this because they gave me hell.
That's a naughty kid.
So it's a little bit similar. So leading on from that then, how do you get inside your characters' heads?
I think once you know the setup and you know the situation that they're in, a lot of it comes through dialogue. So while I'm planning what they're going to say, I think that forms their character. And also with dialogue, I like to say it out loud as well. So perhaps on the day that I'm going to be writing a particular scene, I normally start the day by walking the dog, and I will try out various snippets of dialogue, you know, while I'm walking, and just hearing, do they sound true to how people actually talk? They sound true to the characters. And that's a really important thing. And you don't, sometimes you can't see that when it's written on a page or on a screen. You actually need to hear it.
Yeah.
So how they speak definitely impacts how I will write them. I know a lot of people are more hung up on how they look. I kind of have a hazy image of how my characters look, and I will just obviously describe them, but I don't actually base them on anybody, because I find that again is too limiting. So it's very hard when people sort of say, if it was ever a film, who would you cast? Because I can sort of see, well, you know, they're tall, they're broad shouldered, they've got green eyes, you know, blonde hair or whatever, but I can't see a face, and I can't.
It's not a real vivid picture for you.
No, and that's the nice thing, because how I see them in my head is obviously completely different to how a reader will see them. So, and then sometimes when they play that game and they sort of people tell me who they would cast, I will sort of think, really? Oh, okay, all right, yeah, I can see that. So yeah, it's a good fun party game.
Yeah, and I think that's really, I don't know if that's unusual or not. I don't know if an author's ever said that, where they can't actually properly picture the character. So yeah. Okay, next question. So I was reading a little bit more about you, and your bio says that whilst you've been writing for fun all your life, Fractured, your first book, was published quite recently in 2013. So I just was a bit intrigued by that. I wondered if you'd tell us a bit more about your writing journey.
Yeah, I was a wannabe author for a very long time, and like a lot of people, hadn't really appreciated how to get into the industry, how to present a book properly, who to show a book to. I have a cupboard with maybe about 4 or 5 failed novels, and they'll be staying in that cupboard until we move house. They were sent out back in the old days, when you sent everything snail mail rather than, you know, and I would just send them to publishers. I had no agent. I didn't understand the process. There probably wasn't at the end of the day, they weren't good enough to be published, but then, you know, you cut your teeth and you learn. But Fractured was the first one that I'd really was disappointed that when I sent it out, it didn't find a home. But again, I wasn't probably doing that correctly. And it wasn't until my daughter went to work in the publishing industry, and at that time there were a lot of stories coming out of people self-publishing and then being picked up by traditional publishers, that she was curious enough to sort of want to experiment and how the process was from the other side, from an author's point of view. And luckily, having a mother who'd written a book that wasn't doing anything gave her the opportunity, and obviously gave me an opportunity. I'd not had the confidence to self-publish myself. I mean, just more on the technology side than anything else. I wasn't sure how to go about it. She volunteered to, she said, send it over to me. And fortunate we had weather not dissimilar to what we've got now, people getting snowed in. So she was imprisoned in her flat over a weekend, and it only took a day for her to put the book up on Kindle Direct Publishing, which is part of Amazon.
Yeah.
And with a cover, and that was how. So when people ask me, you know, is it easy to self-publish? I always say, yes, it's very easy. Just get your daughter to do it for you. So I can't tell you how difficult, but it only happened in a day. I don't think it could have been that tough. And from that point, we had minimal sales for a few months, but things didn't really take off for me until we took advantage of their 5-day free promotion that you can do part of publishing, which brings the book to a lot more people's attention. A lot of people look to see what's on the free list. And then over that 5-day period, the book got downloaded 10,000 times, which was a huge jump. And it made it jump up the charts, which then brought it to the attention of a literary agent who contacted me. And then I signed with her. And then I was very fortunate. And about a week or so later, I had a 2-book deal.
That's amazing.
And I didn't realize at the time, I think, just how amazing that was.
That's amazing.
I thought that was par for the course. And, at the time, my daughter did tell me it's like you've won the author lottery here. You really have. It's an author fairy tale. So appreciate it now.
No, that's right. Yeah, that is amazing. So I guess you're quite grateful to your daughter then.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I do tell her that I owe it all to her, and then she asks why she doesn't get half the money. So then we normally change the subject. Then it's easier that way.
Something you don't bring up around.
Not too often.
So a great start to your writing journey, and now your books are really popular in other countries, as well as here. How does it feel to receive acclaim from all over the world?
It's absolutely amazing. It really is. Every time that we sell Fractured or any of the other titles to a new territory, it fills me with absolute amazement. That my books have been to places, many places that I've never been to. Whenever we were abroad, back in the days when people went abroad on holiday.
I remember that.
Just vaguely.
Yeah.
I can't walk past a bookshop without going in and having a look. To be honest, I've only ever seen it a couple of times in other countries. That doesn't stop me looking. But it's fascinating, the different covers that most of them are nothing like the UK covers. And my agent very wisely told me right at the very beginning that you should trust your foreign publishers. If the cover looks a little strange to you, they know their own market. They know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Whenever I'm shown a cover, it's normally my knee-jerk reaction is, that's fantastic, that's fine.
Good.
And I have a bookshelf full of books that I can't read because they're in languages I can't speak. Some of them with Chinese writing or in a Russian alphabet. I don't even know which bit's name, but I'm very, very proud of them. And I get some great feedback from people, and a lot of readers in Germany, where all of my books have been published in Germany. And it's lovely that some of them are so impatient that they will actually read the English version first.
Wow.
Wait for the German translation. So I'm in awe of their prowess being able to do that in another language. And also,
I am. Yeah, I think that's amazing. I'd love to be able to do that, actually. Yeah, and then obviously, like, sometimes the title gets changed as well, doesn't it, in another language?
Absolutely. In fact, I was sending a message to my German publisher because in Germany, Sky Full of Stars is actually going to be called To the Moon and Back, which was my working title for the book all the way through. And then it was decided to be changed to A Sky Full of Stars for the UK market. But it's quite nice that it's actually going to be my first title as well. So I'm kind of chuffed about that.
Yeah, that's really nice. You might know Phaedra Patrick. We've done an interview with her on our Facebook page, and she actually lives quite locally, but her books are published. She did Curious Charms of Arthur Pepper, and she has a lovely picture of all the covers together. It's really nice.
That's rather nice.
Yeah, it looks really cool. I always really like looking at that because, like you say, it's totally different sometimes in another country.
Absolutely. I mean, the American covers are different from the UK. They're much more photographic than that's what is, what the American reader is looking for. But
yeah.
but a little strange, but I'd go with the flow.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I always ask this question. What's the best thing and the worst thing about being an author?
The best thing, I think, definitely is having a job, which is something that you be anyway. Paid for something that you do for love. And if the money all stopped and the book deals all stopped, the writing wouldn't stop. I would still be doing it with less pressure, probably a little slower, but it's a bug. It's in you. And as much as people might think, oh, I'll write a book, maybe I'll do it one day. You can't not write if that bug is there, if that is there, it won't be put off and it won't be silenced. And that's a really strong impetus to write a book. And it's almost like a bonus if you get it published, if other people get to read it, because you just want to write, having a story in your head that won't go away until you get it down on paper or screen these days. So that's definitely the best bit. The worst bit, probably the isolation. Particularly if you're used to working, back in the day when we weren't all working from home, people were working in busy offices and lots of people all around. I've worked in big corporations. I worked for 21 years in a school, so there was a lot of people around. And that to being just on your own all day, and no water cooler talk, nobody to stop and have a chat with over coffee, and apart from the dog and the cat, and they're not great conversation.
I think more so now that we're all experiencing that a bit.
Yeah, it's almost like we've been authors have been in training for this for a while, so it's nearly as hard as everybody else.
It seems ages since I was in the office and you could discuss things as a group, like you're saying, and bounce ideas off each other and things. Do you have like author friends who you can maybe share this with?
I do, yes. I have a really good group of author friends, and back in the day when we were all going out and about, we used to do our office Christmas lunch together. Summer works outing. So all of these involve eating and drinking, probably too much. But that was lovely, and we've all been kept in touch. We have our own little WhatsApp group, and and that's fantastic support. I think authors, it's a strange industry, because in any other industry, the people that you're competing with, your competitors, might be someone that you keep at arm's length. But authors, they're so welcoming. I noticed that, and I've mentioned that many times when I've sort of bumped into people at the RNA. They're very, very welcoming to newcomers. It's not as if anybody coming into the industry is a threat to you. They're coming in and they're bringing readers, then those readers aren't going to think, well, I'm just going to read this new author and I won't read anybody else. Anything of books to people benefits all of us. So it's very nice, embracing and very supportive industry. When you have a book out, and fellow authors will tweet about it and quote on it, and are excited to receive a proof copy of it. That's so welcoming, so warm, and they're a very nice group of people.
Yeah, it sounds good. And I think I've never thought of it like that, but you're right. Authors do recommend each other's product, where you wouldn't get that in many other businesses, would you?
No,
you wouldn't get Apple going, oh, here, try the new Samsung, it's brilliant.
No, exactly. It'd be refreshing if they did.
It would, they should try it. So, how has the last 12 months been for you, and how have you got through the current pandemic?
I like everybody else. It's a strain. Work-wise, I would say that it's probably had less impact on somebody that was already working at home.
Yeah.
But the the things that you can't do, which I think were part of my life as working from home, was making sure I met up with fellow authors, you know, going out for lunch, coffees, that kind of thing, out for drinks in the evening, to counteract, you know, having been working alone. And obviously you miss those dreadfully, but more than anything else, it is the missing of family. Both grown-up children who both live away from home, and not seeing them for such huge long periods of time. And yeah, that's great. WhatsApp, Zoom, whatever you're using, it's great to see their faces, but it's not the same.
No.
I haven't hugged my children in over a year.
Wow. Yeah.
It really feels odd because
yeah.
Once I get to hugging them, I'm probably never going to let them go. It's going to be so embarrassing.
Yeah, it's going to be an epic hug when you see them.
It will be, yes.
And have you found that that's affected your motivation when you're writing and things?
It has. I mean, it is difficult to, I mean, particularly I think in the first wave, when everything was very, very, I mean, I'm not saying it's not scary now, it's scary every time you turn on the news. But in the first wave, you actually were feeling like you were living in a science fiction story. It was very hard. And I know some authors have said, you know, that they found their writing a solace and that they would, you know, disappear into their pretend world. But it's actually quite hard, or I found it very hard to disassociate enough to go into a make-believe part of my mind when, you know, reality was so vivid and so incomprehensible in those early days. So yeah, it was it has been difficult, and I don't think I'm the only author who's probably struggled. And
no,
a lot of time looking at the screen, and in between looking at Facebook and things that you're probably not meant to be at when you're meant to be working. But it's harder to get going, and hopefully once it's back to normal, everyone will eventually find their old groove back again.
Yeah, and there'll be maybe more hugs and
absolutely.
And then I just think I might be a bit more like, sometimes before people would say, oh, do you want to do this, do you want to do that, and be like, no, I'm all right. I think I'll just try and do a lot more than I did, really.
I think people will be saying yes to things a lot more.
Yeah.
You know, that it's all too short and it can change so quickly.
Yeah, definitely. So you've got through, and obviously other than your books, would you recommend any reads that have got you through the lockdowns?
Oh yes, I've had some good books that I've just finished reading. The Survivors, which is by Jane Harper, an Australian author. She wrote The Dry. I think that's probably her biggest.
Yeah.
Very, very good. So I've read all of hers. There was a book I particularly liked, and I knew I liked it as soon as I heard the premise, because it was one of those books where you think, oh, I wish I'd written that. So that's always a good time for me.
Yeah,
called The Sight of You by Holly Miller.
Okay.
That's a very unusual love story. Absolutely recommend that. I've recently discovered the writing of Beth O'Leary, who I love.
Yeah.
Flatshare, and I read The Switch during lockdown. But I've also enjoyed thrillers. One particularly, when I read last summer, I believe, was Will Dean's new one. He's an author who has done a series with a one particular character called Moody, but this was a standalone book called The Last Thing to Burn. And absolutely raced through that, so that was really good. So there's been sort of a cross section of, you know, love stories, and then the last one I read recently was actually I was sort of in two minds, do I want to read this at the moment, because it's actually based around a pandemic, and that was an interesting premise, because everybody that I'd sort of been talking to online, authors, had been sort of saying, do we put the pandemic in our book, you know, do we do we write it in, or do we pretend it didn't happen? And were there going to be a rush of books that were set in the pandemic? But this particular book was actually published by my daughter's company where she works, and it was actually written and all agreed and finished before the pandemic ever happened.
Okay.
You know, I mean, it's a very different story, and it does just deal with a really interesting premise of, you know, a horrible pandemic where there's just, it would seem, one survivor.
Right. Okay.
You and that was fascinating. And it sounds a dark book, but it's not. There's a lot of humor in it, and a lot.
Okay.
So I would recommend that one, but I can understand that some people might think
Wouldn't want. So what was that one called?
that one's called Last One at the Party,
Okay.
by Bethany Clift.
Yeah,
I think that only came out last week, but yeah, I really enjoyed that, and it, obviously it's one of those ones that makes you think, like, well, what if that was you? You know, which, you know, maybe when the book was written would have been a bizarre thing to even been thinking, but
yeah,
you know, it
yeah,
became an awful lot more real. You know,
yeah.
gone through.
I think it'll be interesting going forward how much kind of features in books and things, because I think Millie Johnson asked the question, and the overall opinion was no, please, we just want escapism. But yeah, you can't deny that it's happened either. So
It's very different. I think a lot of people are
part.
sort of books in like 2019 or something like that, so that you don't have to, you know, you can't write a scene and then think, oh, he couldn't do that because he'd have to have his face mask on, or, you know, he couldn't. There's the hand sanitizer, and you can't half go into it half mast. You know, you've either got to completely,
Yeah.
you know, bend belief and say, okay, that didn't happen, or it didn't happen in my world that I've created. And
Yeah.
and yes, I think Millie's absolutely, you know, hit the nail on the head. I think, you know, when she's discovered people actually don't want to read about it. It's been bad enough. Through it was bad enough. You don't really want to have to have it, unless it's part of the story. Unless it is the, then that's a different thing. But as a background, then I think, you know, we'll all happily blip over that.
Yeah, definitely. Just absolutely. So this is the last question from me. And I apologise to the people at home if you absolutely detest it, but love it or hate it, it's happening this weekend. So it's quite imminent, and especially because you've won Romantic Novel of the Year. What do you think of Valentine's Day?
Oh, that's difficult because it is so over commercialized. And yes, I hate to buy into the hype of it all.
Yeah.
I'd like to say, so I don't, you know, endorse it in any way.
Yeah.
However, this will be the first year that my husband will actually be let off the hook from buying a card, because we physically can't get out to get a card or anything. So although I on paper, I think I don't like it, in reality, if, you know, if it wasn't for the pandemic, I would be looking that morning for my card.
Yeah.
I would be looking for a small bunch of flowers. Each year we always say, you know, we're not doing Valentine's presents, are we? Or like that. And, you know, we say, no, we're not doing that. And then sort of about the night before, I just sort of say, you know, flowers aren't presents, don't you? And then I watch as this awful blank look comes over his face. Okay, right, and I'm just going out to the petrol station then.
Yeah, I think it's a funny one, because, like you say, you don't want to be part of the hype, and but then if you're that couple that doesn't do it, and
then
it's a funny one.
See everybody else on Facebook and they're saying, "Oh, look what he bought me," and I'm thinking, "Oh, well, that was nice."
Yeah,
and then, it's like foot in both camps, I think, really.
Yeah. And of course, you've got Valentine's Day and other kind of celebrations. So if you want to celebrate with your friends and stuff, then do that as well. But like you say, this year's a little bit different, isn't it?
It is indeed.
So we're going to take some questions from the audience now, if there are any, we hope. Just wait for them to appear on screen. And here we go. So Rachel Watson, how long does it take you to write a book after you have the initial idea?
Once you've got the initial idea, if you're writing under contract and you've got a publisher and an agent, before you can actually start, you need to get green flags from everybody. So that will take a while. You're going to have to pitch the idea to everybody, which is possibly, just a matter of a phone call or an email, and you're ready to go after that point. Or it can be that it needs longer and a discussion. That's because it might not fit in with the publisher's plans, or perhaps another author book very similar in the pipeline. So those are considerations that you might not be aware of. But once everybody has said yes, they like the idea, they've read your synopsis, they think, which actually your synopsis may have very little resemblance to what actually the book looks like in the end. I've yet to find one that is exactly the same as the book that I've written, but they're a good bouncing off point. But it would take about a year to write a book. I think the only book that I wrote quicker was the second one that I did, which was the very first time I'd had an official deadline. First book, you can take 10 years to write your first book. Second one, I had a deadline, and I think I finished it and completed it about 4 or 5 months before the deadline, because I was so good. And I did have a day job then at the time, so I'm astounded with myself, impressed with myself that I did that, because I can't do it now. No, I don't have a day job.
You don't have a day job.
This is my only job. So I thought at the beginning that if it was taking me a year to write it when I had a day job, that I would do 2 books a year after I gave up the day job. That hasn't happened. And now I realise that will never happen.
Oh, thank you, Rachel. Thanks for your question. But any more? Dan. Oh, Dan's part of our writers groups. Hiya, Dan. Hi, Dani. How hard did you have to work promoting your self-published novel?
I actually did very little work, which probably I got away with only because it was very much in its infancy then, and there weren't that many people who were self-publishing. I know now, if you're self-publishing, you really do have to have a very dedicated marketing and publicity strategy yourself, and you really do have to bang on doors and make sure that you have a visible presence online, social media, and all of that. But because I was doing it back in 2013, and my book was only self-published for 6 months before it was then switched over and picked up by my publisher, I didn't do that. I pretty much, all the promotion was done for me by the Kindle direct publishing scheme, which allowed me to do that promotion, the free promotion. And because of that, it got a lot of reviews, and that then was almost self-perpetuating.
Yeah.
But I think doing it now, you wouldn't be able to achieve that level of success that I was fortunate enough to have now, because there are so many people self-publishing, and I think to get to the pile, you do have to put an awful lot of work in, easily as much work as you do in writing the book to promoting it. And I probably would have got lost in the crowd if I was doing it now.
Okay, good question. Thank you, Dan. Okay, Caroline's asking, good evening. How do you decide on the location or setting of the book?
Normally, I have tried to keep things somewhere where I think I either live or could live. So I've not set anything off on a remote Scottish island or anything abroad, unless I've actually visited there, and then they may feature in maybe small scenes. What I tend to do is not to name real places, apart from, I might mention London or something like that. But a lot of my books are sort of kind of home counties kind of area based rural locations. I don't use real villages or real towns. I tend to make them up so that they're based, which is probably very lazy of me, which means I can skip corners on research and things, and put churches where there aren't churches, and hospitals where there aren't hospitals. But also, they're my books, so I can I can make things up.
Yeah, of course. Okay,
Yes,
great question.
yeah, I think most of mine more have a countryside because I live in the country myself. So there's a rural aspect running through them.
Yeah.
More than city living, perhaps.
Okay. You'll have to have an excuse to go to loads of different places for research.
Yes, that's a good one.
Are there any more questions? Oh, Michaela, she works for Oldham Libraries. Hi, Michaela. Where is the strangest place you have suddenly had an idea?
I get a lot of ideas when I'm in the shower. I think, and I don't know,
Yeah, I do.
I don't know if it's the running water or the fact that it's the most inconvenient place where you can actually write anything down.
Yeah.
And I can either get a plot idea or I can get a sentence that I want one of my characters to say. And then you're running, dripping through the house looking for a pencil and paper so you can write it down before you forget. So, but I also, I think before I sort of realised I should write them down or record my phone, I'd get a lot of ideas when I was walking the dog in the field. Just seems to be that when you're not trying, the one time you can't get an idea is when you're sitting at your desk and staring at the screen. I find that would be the hardest place to get an idea. So if you normally put yourself in a location where it'd be inconvenient, the ideas are more likely to pop up.
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually.
It is.
Michaela, yeah. We got any more? Okay, Teresa Starr. What authors or genres do you like to read yourself?
I do like romantic fiction. I think that's probably evident in the fact that whatever I write, there's some element of romance running through it. I do like thrillers as well, and for a long time I sort of moved away from them, and I'm just sort of rediscovering how much I enjoy them. So this year has been, me dipping back in and reading, as I said, the Will Dean book, Louise Candlish's books. So they're not dark. I mean, they're thrillers more than crime books, I would say.
Yes.
Crime procedural books, not necessarily my cup of tea. I don't like gore. I don't like horror books, but my favorite author is Stephen King, which sounds like a contradiction. He's my favorite author because of his ability to tell the most amazing stories, rather than key bits, which I kind of like skip through. It's almost like reading with your hands over your eyes, like, oh, I don't want to see this bit. But those female fiction is my go-to, I think. And there's nothing like picking up a Sophie Kinsella or a Page Toon or something like that to just find some escapism. That's probably what I'm looking for, particularly.
Have you read I Owe You One by
No.
Sophie Kinsella?
Oh, is that her latest one?
I think so, ish. I read it over Christmas and I enjoyed it. The premise is that the main character in it, I think, looks after a laptop for someone in a coffee shop, and something happens, I won't say what, and she basically saves his computer and therefore saves him a load of hassle, because everything, his life is on that computer and his work and everything. So he gives her a business card and says, like, I owe you one. And that's where the story kind of starts. It's good.
Well, that's a good jumping off point for a story, isn't it?
Yeah. So, yeah. Thank you, Teresa. Should we go for a couple more, Dani? Is that okay with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Lovely. Amanda's asking if you have a favourite book you wrote, and likewise one that you felt a tad disappointed, and why.
It's very easy to say that your favourite one is always the last one you wrote, because that's sort of like your most recent child you've had. But I think when you look back, after a few months have passed, my favourite book, I think I'm probably torn between two. my first one being Fractured, because that was the book that started it. It made me an author when I'd never been one. So that's always going to have a really, really special place in my heart. And Our Song, which was my third book, which a lot of people really liked, and I felt that I'd found a stride then, and I got lost in the story so much, and I just enjoyed writing that one incredibly. Some of them are harder to write. I don't have any that I feel disappointed in. I did have one big false start on a book that came, that would have been my fourth book, which eventually was changed, and I wrote This Love, which was the Rona, so that was lovely. But there was a book that This Love was sort of like came on the coattails of, if you like, and that one just wasn't working. And it was one of those awful moments where you realize, you know, I have spent 6 months on something that I just don't think is going to fly.
Yeah.
And you like to think that maybe you can salvage bits, and I did salvage a few bits from it, but you know, the file is there on my computer. I look at it and I think, oh, maybe I could do something, but maybe it's best not to dig them up again, you know.
Okay. Just let it go.
Let it go.
Yeah. Thank you, Amanda. Got time for a couple more? Oh, sounds like someone. So what's the hardest part of writing a novel, the beginning or the end?
I think the beginning for me. I normally will know the beginning and the end before I start. So I'm not a great plotter, so the bit in the middle will always be a mystery. But it's where you actually join the story. I think with pretty much every book that I've written, I could have written the end chapter before I wrote the beginning. I knew exactly, and I could visualize the end scene as though it was a film in my head. But the beginning is difficult because I'm very aware that you have just a very short time frame, a small window to grab a reader's attention, and that they're probably more likely to put it down if you haven't got them by the first page or two. A lot of pressure on getting that beginning right, and there are, I'm sure, brilliant books, but if they're a really slow burn, you're never going to get to find the good bits. So that's hard. I think beginnings are harder, and you don't want to do the same thing, and you don't want to resort to tropes and tricks. You really do want to grab someone's attention, and if they've taken it off a shelf in a bookshop, you want to make sure that they then walk to the till with it and don't slot it back.
Yeah, because if I'm not gripped in the first couple of chapters, that's it.
And I think there's nothing wrong with giving up on a book. I mean, I used to have this idea that, I've started it now, I have to finish, as though it was, sort of like, some penance if you didn't. And then I read sort of somebody put on Facebook something like, life is too short to read a bad book. So,
yeah, it is.
And it might not be bad.
There's too many out there.
There's too many good books. So even if a book isn't bad, it just might not do it for you, and then just put it back,
Yeah, it's the same with like TV or a film or anything. It's like people, like there'll be the latest Netflix that everyone's binge watching, and you're like, what am I not seeing? Like I couldn't get into that Tiger King.
No, I never tried that. But funnily enough, the Netflix series Schitt's Creek, everybody was raving about it.
Yeah,
I tried one episode, my husband and I, and we didn't like it. And then after sort of looking on Facebook and saying everybody is really raving about this, through to the final series. So sometimes maybe it's just your state of mind at the time. Because got to the end and we thought we loved every single episode of this. What did we miss time round? But just have to be in the right place, the right time. And maybe that's the same with books, books that you abandon, maybe in a year or so you pick them up and they feel different.
Yeah. And have you ever, because you said you generally know the end, have you ever changed the ending when you've got there?
No. I think an editor once asked me to change an ending of a book. and I did change that ending, and wrote an ending that she'd asked for, and I was so unhappy with it, and it weighed on my mind for days and days, weeks maybe even, that I ended up getting back in touch and saying, I don't like this. I want the first ending back again.
Right.
Unfortunately, she was, understanding enough to say, no, it's your book. You have to have the story that you need to tell.
Okay, that's
So
really...
we switched it back out, and it was my ending. And if people don't like it, well, okay, everyone's allowed an opinion, but that was the ending that I wanted, and it just didn't feel true.
Cool. Have we got any more questions from people watching at home? Okay, Katie also works for Oldham Libraries. They're really on it, our staff tonight. Do you have a book that is special to you or holds a lot of sentimental value?
I think one of the ones that holds a lot of sentimental value is probably Nicholas Sparks' The Notebook.
Okay.
I loved the story. I loved the film. Jojo Moyes' Me Before You.
I was just going to say that one.
Which, and again, for some reason, I was very resistant to reading that. I didn't read it when everybody else did, when, like millions of other people had read it and raved about it. And it's almost like, well, I'm not going to read it because, just because everybody's saying it's wonderful. Yeah. And then eventually, I don't remember the circumstance, but I did read it, and I saw exactly why millions of people loved it. And yes,
did you cry, Dani?
I did. I cry. I cry in books. I cry in TV adverts. Yeah, I cry all over the place. I cry when I'm writing my own books as well.
Wow.
Which is, I don't cry actually when I'm writing them, but I have a habit of, I read to my husband whatever it is I've written that day. And if it's an emotional scene that I've managed to get through completely dry-eyed while I'm writing it, when it comes to actually saying it out loud, that's when I lose it. And I get all embarrassed and I pretend, something in my eye. Must be getting a cold or something.
Yeah, that's a really good sign though, isn't it? That other people are going to be moved by it. And I'm glad you...
if I can upset myself, if I can, connect and see it all so clearly, and a lot of those perhaps involve children that I've had in the last few books or things like that, and I can, it's it pulls at the heartstrings, and I think, well, hopefully it will connect with other people as well. Yeah,
I'm really glad to hear as well that I'm not the only one who cries at the drop of a hat.
Oh no, I mean I've got worse since I've been older, I'm sure, but yeah. But my daughter cries, and maybe it's inherited because my daughter cries every year when holidays are coming. The Coca-Cola adverts are on the television.
Oh yeah,
I have no idea why, but she cries every time.
Oh, that's so sweet. That's lovely.
She's gonna hate. I hope she's not listening to this because she's gonna hate me for having outed her now.
Yeah. Okay, I forgot to do this last time, so I'm going to remember this evening. So Sam has got the fun task of choosing a winner. If you'd like to announce them now, Sam. Da da da. No pressure. Oh, Dan Forrester. Yeah. So if you send us a message on Facebook, we'll sort out delivery. Congratulations and enjoy. Yeah, and I can't. Yeah. I can't wait to read it. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, Dani, and for taking time out to join us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. I've really, really enjoyed it.
It's been great fun. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it has. So, as Dani said, the book came out last week. It's out now. You can get it at Oldham Libraries. You can get it on our Borrow Box. You can get it from any good bookshop. And that's if I don't beat you to it. And yeah, I hope to see you at our next probably online author event for the foreseeable. Yeah, keep an eye on our Facebook page. We've got Martina Evans, a poet, for International Women's Day in March, and we're going international. We've got an author called Bonnie Sue Hitchcock for World Book Night in April, and she lives in Alaska. So yeah, that'll be different. But Thank you so much again, Dani, for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure interviewing you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I wish you all the very best for A Sky Full of Stars. It sounds wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone for your questions at home. And thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you soon. Good evening. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.